Hello and welcome to another conversation. And this month, as I've shared before, we are talking about legacy building. Um, but before we get into the conversation today and hearing from Dr. Worley, I just want to say thanks to all those who are here with us today to join us on this with this conversation to have this dialogue about this important topic about building legacy. My name is Richard A. Cross, Dr. Richard A. Cross, and today we have as guest Dr. Stacy Worley. Dr. Worley, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Thank you, Dr. Cross. It is indeed a pleasure to be here with you today to have this conversation on legacy building.
Man, it's a pleasure, having you here. I know this is your commitment for the work that you're doing. It really demonstrate legacy building. Not just for yourself, but for the youth within your community. You are showing them what is possible. And we're going to get more into that anyway as we continue this conversation. But before I even tell the listeners more about you, I'm just asking those who are here with us, please share this link with your connection. I can guarantee you, you will learn something from today's conversation, and I hope you're not selfish. So you can go ahead and share the link with your connection so they can learn as well. And you may not, whatever we share today may not be all that you need, but again, we have to be lifelong learners, and we also are responsible to share what we learn with others. And even if we know something, sorry, it's always good to be reminded of what we need to do to make a difference. So I'll just give you a brief introduction of Dr. Worley. Dr. Worley have spent 32 years as a corporate banker. He's now in education for 5 years, and he's the director of Dayton, My Brother's Keeper. And I can tell you, if you are on social media, you may have seen his commitment to empowering the youth. And Black men in education is a great thing because that's one thing that we have been seeing a lot of for the past couple of years where they want to see more Black men in education. Dr. Worley, came out of the banking world and realized there is a need. Put himself in position to be that example for our young people. So before we even start with the conversation itself, me asking question, I'll ask Dr. Worley to share more about himself so you all can get to know him a little bit more before we get into the conversation today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Cross. And again, it is indeed a pleasure to be with you to have this conversation. I'm always excited to share and pour into anybody who is concerned about our young people and their future. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Stacy Worley, director for My Brother's Keeper Dayton, as well as director for Dayton Public Schools College and Career Readiness Culture Engagement. I serve at the pleasure as the assistant associate minister at Shiloh Baptist Church as well. So I'm always about our people. I'm always about building and always about establishing and positioning people for a positive future.
Man, thank you. And, that is commendable. Again, being a role model and an example for our young people is important because, as you have heard many times, that it's easier to become what you see. And by demonstrating, by being in the space itself, is a great example for our young people. So, you know, the conversation will be, focused heavily on leadership, um, mentorship, and what we need to do as Black men to
Mhm.
make a difference, and why it is important. and because we know that society, plays well, put us in a position sometimes where what we hear a lot is not the positive things. So we have to now be more intentional in creating that narrative that we want society to have of us. And that's why we're having these conversation. But so my first question to you is, what does the term legacy mean to you, and how do you define it in your own life?
Well, thank you for the question, Dr. Cross. For me, legacy is a gift, something transmitted or received from our ancestor, or older family member, predecessor. For me, legacy is also multi tiered. For starters, we must first understand and embrace our own history, our own culture, and the community for the gifts they have left for us. You see, once we have a deep understanding of this, we must determine what we will leave for the next generation, how we will leave it for the next generation, how we position the next generation, and what building blocks and tools we will leave to make sure the next generation has an opportunity for success.
And I really appreciate you sharing that, because we do have to think about the next generation. We do have to think about what have been placed before us.
Right.
So we understand the legacy of those who came before us, and understand that we have a responsibility to build on it, so the next generation can be somewhat ahead of us. Because I don't believe that the next generation should start exactly where we start, because we're not starting where our ancestors start. They have done the work, they have made the sacrifice. So,
Hmm.
we can be in position, although there are still more work to be done. But it's our responsibility, as you have stated, to make sure we position or help position the next generation to be ahead of us. And if we don't do that, we're doing them and ourselves a disservice. So it's important, as you mentioned, that we think about the next generation when we're talking about legacy, because actually it's not really about us; it's about them. Whatever we do, it's about the next generation, not so much us. We just, I would say, fortunate to be in some of the spaces and the positions that we are in, to do the work that will make a difference for the next generation, because that's who we are doing the work for, when you really look at it. So, my next question to you, were you going to say something else?
I always tell the young boys we stand on the shoulders of giants,
Man,
and
that's it.
that's why it's important for us to understand our culture, the history, and all the things and gifts that they left before us.
Man, that is important. And that's a great reminder that we do stand on the shoulders of giants. And that means we can see further than did. So we should, create that shoulder for the next generation. I appreciate you making that plug right there. So my next question to you is, what pivotal moment in your life shaped your mindset around about building a legacy? I know you mentioned that you spent 32 years in corporate banking. A lot of people, after they spend over 30 years in a position or a career, they take off and say, I'm going to enjoy life because I've given so much. So, I don't know if that really helped to shift your mindset or shape your mindset for where you are right now. But I just want to say that. But I also, just what was that pivotal moment for you, that shaped your mindset about legacy building?
I get that question quite often, and a lot of individuals ask me, "How can you, transition from banking to education?" And for me, I got to a plateau where I was always the only one of us in the room, and so I'm always sitting in these panel interviews, and there are times where young men or young women come before in these panel interviews, and they are not prepared. And sometimes you see being on the inside, you really can't help an individual. So as I, finished up my seminary time, and while I was working in corporate, I decided that it was time to transition. It was time for me to give back and to pour and start mentoring to others. The other pivotal moments in my life was during that time was becoming a father, and then accepting my calling to ministry, and then being ordained. And then lastly, spending time in Ghana had me to reflect on what life is like really and what is more important. Being able to live in the village for several weeks in the village of Damanasi, and being able to experience what it's like without a cell phone, what it's like without running water, what it's like without a kitchen, or all those creature comforts that we have, and really embracing life and what it's really about. And so for me, pouring back all these moments that I just share with you, they share a common theme. And it's all to say that life purpose is bigger than you and me, like you alluded to earlier. And then the second is having a submission to be humble and firm with integrity is key. But most importantly, and not the least, is learn how to listen as God leads us in every endeavor of our lives.
And as you shared, being in the space where you were like interviewing individuals who weren't prepared, and to adhere to that need, because once they get there, it's kind of too late.
Right.
And for you to see that these young people really need someone who understands what it takes to get into those spaces, into corporate, and to help fulfill that gap, to make sure they are prepared. But you said something that is really important, when it comes to legacy building, when it comes to making an impact, that feeling, that desire, to go and do the work, to trust that feeling, because we all have different things that we're supposed to do, but we all don't adhere to that inner feeling, inner drive, because sometimes it's about taking that step of faith without knowing, because this is somewhere new and we can't trust it. And I strongly believe if God put it in us, it means we can do it. But a lot of times we doubt that feeling. So I'm really glad that you mentioned it. Because a lot of times we do have this strong desire to do something to make a difference, but we don't know how it's going to happen, not knowing that this is what will help us to feel fulfilled. So because I don't know how to do it, and so I'm not going to do it. But as they always said, once we get the vision, there is provision. There, there will be, ways to do the work that we feel called or compelled to do, especially when it comes on to thinking about our legacy. Because I don't remember who said it. Our legacy is what we help others to see what they get to do because of what we have done. So
Exactly.
yes. Go ahead.
And one of the joys that I have of taking that leap, as you say, like I alluded to earlier, it was just I was the only one that saw in that space that looked like me.
Correct.
But now I have some mentees. I have roughly 10 to 15 mentees in that same space that I once sat in.
Correct.
And they can lean on each other, and they can reach out to me from time to time, and so it's a joy to know it was all worth it.
Correct. Correct. And that's great, man, to help others to be in positions that they might not have had the chance to be in. And that's what we have to do. We have to get to the point where we become the door openers for others, or the ones who can help them to get into spaces that they sometimes wouldn't, and understand what it takes to do well in those spaces. So, my next question to you: how can Black men shift from a survival mindset to a legacy building mindset?
Black men must first know their worth. They must learn from the past and build on to the future. You see, a survival mindset is one of those that have no hope for a future. It's a mindset that focuses on the here and the now without any regard for tomorrow or the next generation. But a legacy mindset, and that's what we're talking about right now. A
Correct.
legacy mindset allows Black men to see that there are many paths to success, and they don't have to be afraid to choose the path that's less traveled. They don't have to be scared. They can go in knowing that they are not just building for themselves, but they're building for others simultaneously.
Well, I know you said something earlier, which kind of slipped me after you said know your worth, which is really important when it comes to moving from survival to legacy mindset. Because if we don't know what we worth or our value, we will settle. But you
Exactly.
said something after that which I slipped, but I think it's important. Could you repeat after you had stated know your worth?
We must learn from our past and build on to the future.
Man, that is so important. And the past is not only our experience, but those before us, their experience. And because we don't want to make the same mistakes
Hmm.
that the people before us have made. And they also have done some great things. And it's important we learn from those great things as well. And but when it comes to that legacy mindset, we really have to know our worth. Because sometimes, as black men, we get beaten down by life, by society, and we take on that as who we are. The limiting beliefs that we
Hmm.
are not worthy, the labels, the stereotypes, and that sometimes become who we think we are when we are so much more than those labels and stereotypes. And that goes back to you being in spaces to help others to see that more is possible. Because for some of us, if we don't see other black men in those spaces, it's hard to comprehend the possibility. Because who have done it? Yeah, I've seen people, but I don't know how they got there. But once they get to talk to individuals who may have overcome similar sorry challenges as they are experiencing, can help them to realize that they don't have to settle for where they are, and they can build on what they learn for what they
Hmm.
want. But it always starts, as you mentioned, which I really glad that you stated, that it starts with you knowing your worth. So I think, and that leads me to my next question. What barriers do you think black men face when it comes to creating generational wealth and stability?
Mm. Black men face significant hurdles in building generational wealth due to historical and ongoing systematic inequalities, including discrimination in housing, employment, and education, as well as having limited access to financial resources and networks. These barriers, unfortunately, make it difficult for Black families to accumulate and pass down that wealth, perpetuating a cycle of the disadvantage, which we see far too often. When some achieve some levels of success, which are self inflicted,
Okay.
they think that they must knock others down in order for them to be successful. And then another self inflicting barrier that we create is trying to acquire a lot of things and putting ourselves further and further in debt. Yet we flaunt and stunt on all the stuff that we've purchased that has no value and it's not building any legacy.
I think.
So,
Go ahead.
those are barriers that were created for us, and then barriers that we create ourselves.
Well, the historical and systemic barriers, we know they're there, and as you mentioned, that we in turn inflict some of the things on ourselves that further put us in a situation that make it harder
Right.
to create a legacy. But one of the things that which I know that you're doing, because it was even part of the seminar you just recently had in Dayton, where you talk about financial literacy
Correct.
and to learn about some of the challenges, because it's important that they know that some of these are systemic. They are in this part of their everyday life,
Hmm.
whatever organization they are involved with, but to understand that they can play a role in creating avenues to get out of the situation. So what would you say is the most important for young people to do to help themselves out of whatever situation that they may get themselves in? Maybe they didn't create it, maybe they start in their family, but what would you say is the best first step?
The first, the best first step is to read more. We don't encourage a lot of reading as a community, and that would be the very first step.
I,
Read
I
more and get the understanding of the financial concept. Get an
I think,
understanding of what life will entail for you financially.
yeah, I think that is important. The education piece is a great place to start.
Hmm.
And as they always said, for us, especially as black males or black boys, they don't read a lot. So, I'm glad that you mentioned that, the importance of reading, because almost everything that we want to learn, especially to get us out of whatever situation that we may be in, it may not be easy, but knowledge, information, which is, more prevalent today than before, can really help to start the ball rolling, to change our situation, or even to start creating generational wealth, because it's not just getting the money or the opportunity. We need to know what to do with whatever opportunity or money we get. So knowledge, reading is important. So how has mentorship played a role in your journey, and why it is important for building a strong legacy?
Mentorship for me has been a blessing. Growing up around older men who deeply love God, who firmly believed in family and are committed to community, was all I knew, Dr. Cross. You see, this foundation laid out for me was non negotiable. These men, this community in which I grew up with, it was this way or this way. There was no option. And so for me, mentorship is, and I watched them pouring into older young boys as I was growing up, and they did the same thing with me. And you knew and understood that you had to pass it down. It was instilled in you at an early age. So mentorship for me was very valuable because it gives you an experience with time. It can give you knowledge with school, and it gives you wisdom without age.
Wow. And before you even go further with the point that you're making, right? Because you have, when you were much younger, right, you have seen black men live the example, share with you what they believe will help you to be the best that you can be. All right, compare then to now. Do you see men in the community living up to the same standard? Maybe here and there you may see them, but in comparison in numbers, from your perspective, I know you are doing it because I've seen the work that you're doing, but compared to when you were much younger to now, do you think the men back then were more intentional in empowering the young people and who they can become than how we are doing that today?
Dr. Cross, I would say I don't see it. to the level that I grew up in, because they weren't just mentoring the young people; they were mentoring young adults. They were mentoring those not as young, as old as they were. They were very vocal. They were in the schools. They were down at City Hall. They were in the businesses. They were out in the community. They were they were community, so to speak. And so, unfortunately, we have transitioned with all the technological things we have. We act more in silos now than we did back then.
Yeah, I think technology will really make us a bit more disconnected. Although we can connect with people wherever they are, but as
Mhm.
in individuals, it's like we're not as social, I believe, as the generations before. Maybe because they had no other option than to come out in the community, meet each other. But I see where listening to older men and them talking about their experience to now, the connection, the lessons, the vision, the impact was more visible,
Hmm.
if I should say. It's like, they were more eager to pass on, what they have learned, their experiences. But I don't see that we are sitting with, the men who are older in our communities to learn from. And maybe that's why, the generation today, the younger than myself, maybe not following a plan to help them to be the best they can be. I'm not saying they're not being the best they can be, but I think if we're not learning from our elders, we are more likely to make some of the same mistakes they have made if we're not listening to them, because they can, when it comes to say legacy building and becoming the best that we can be, it's not always about the success that we achieve. It's also about the mistakes we have made, because I can tell you, don't do this, right? Because I've done it and it didn't work. As well as I can say, do this because I've done it and it worked. So it's important, I believe that, Black men, older, and maybe the platform is not there, for them to share, being that more of the conversation are not so much in the community but online. I think, that can help, pass on those lessons to really empower this generation.
And Dr. Cross, they didn't just pass out lessons. They also helped develop and discipline um, growing up too. And any older man could discipline you, and it was not any pushback from family members or that young person. You just took it and you grew.
But today's a little bit different. You may try
Yeah,
to discipline a young man, you may be getting in a fight,
yeah, yeah,
or something like that. So I think it's a different generation for sure. But I
yes.
think the lessons and experience from those who are older is important, especially when we're talking about building legacy and changing the narrative for one, as we go forward, because we can learn from those who have gone before us, who have been around before us, and they don't have to have great success again, because sometimes it's the lessons from what didn't work will be beneficial as we go forward. So, but my next question to you is, what advice would you give to young Black men about preparing for long-term success?
I would tell a young black male and female, don't box yourself in. Uh, Take a chance on your passion. You can create long term success if you have faith and follow your passion. This is key right here. Stay away from negative people and negative situations. For long term success, you must be laser focused on what is important to you and your family and what you want to do in life.
Sorry, and I like that. about don't box yourself in, especially with today, because you have to be open to the growing market. I believe so you can position yourself to achieve
Mhm.
whatever success you want, because things are changing. And if you only stick to say, this is what I'm going to do, and even if you want to go into teaching, maybe there are flexible ways to become more effective, um, in teaching or whatever career. But I also like, as you stated, stay away from negative people. As they always said, you are like the five closest people to you. And this is for young people out there, especially. If they want to become successful, they have to be mindful of the company they keep. If you want success, if you want to make an impact, and you are around individuals who don't want to make an impact or achieve success the legal way, you're going to start acting like those people you surround yourself with. So I really appreciate you plug that in, because that is important. And not just it's just success in general. If you want more, you want to be around people who will challenge you, who will motivate you, who will encourage you, who will cheer you on and support that vision that you have, for yourself and what you want, to achieve. Because if they are going to be negative or doubtful, you know you're going to start thinking negative and doubtful, because just because they can't see what you see, they may discourage you, um, about your dream, which is really important. So, man, you can't stress that enough when it comes
Mhm.
to especially long-term success. You want to be around people who understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and willing to encourage you as you press forward on that journey. Which leads to my next question. How do you balance personal success with making an impact on your community?
Um, I want to tag in one more thing in that last question before we get into that.
Oh,
Uh,
long-term success.
um, about our young boys. About I always ask our young men and our young ladies, tell me about your best friends.
Hmm.
You know, what are their aspirations, and how can you help them get there? And what are they doing to help you get to yours? And if they can't answer that, you need to reevaluate that friendship, because that's important. Iron sharpens irons, and if they can't help you get to where you're going, and you can't help them, why are they in your circle?
But you know what? Even more important than just them helping you, what you just stated is so important and valuable. And even as adults, we may need to take that on, because you tell them to ask them what their friends can do for them, or how they can help their friends to get to where they want to do, where what they want to be. First, they have to have something that they're aspiring to, which is
Right.
so important, because somebody cannot help you to get to somewhere that you don't know you want to go. Man,
Exactly.
that is so powerful, because first, you are helping them to create a vision, not only for themselves, but to be around other visionaries, people with vision, people who want to achieve something. Man, that is so important. And if we can get our young people to think like that,
hmm
and the change, we can't measure it.
and now to answer your question about balancing personal success with impacting, was it impacting my community?
Yeah.
Um, for me, it's only achievable when you stay committed to having a servant's heart and a balance for God, family, work, and community, with God being first. It's imperative that you understand that there has to be a balance. You can't be so driven to work, 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 and you don't have a conversation with God and asking Him, "Am I on the right path?" or am I listening and connecting with my family, or am I listening and being a part of the community? It can't be all about you.
That is important. That is important. You have to. Well, I believe if the work you think you're doing is about you, you're not gonna find you need it needs to connect to something greater than self.
Exactly.
To have that energy, to have that drive, because when you yourself don't feel like it, but because you're doing it not just for you, man, the energy, the drive, you know come from somewhere, come from God, come from the people who you know will benefit from the work that you're doing. So it's important that we tie something greater than self to the work that we're doing. And that's a great reminder, because a lot of people sometimes say, what, man, I don't feel like doing it. But when purpose is tied to the work, which is not about me,
Hmm.
man, you be surprised. Even when you don't feel like it, you gain that strength to press forward, because you remember those who are counting on you and how important it is, to show up and do it. Because even the people we admire today, they too sometimes feel as if they don't want to do it, but because it's not just about them, they find it within themselves, to do the work. So I really, appreciate you sharing that reminder with all of us, because the work can get demanding at times. It can get real demanding
Yeah.
at times. So it's important that we tie it to something greater than self, to God, to the community, to family, to those who we believe will benefit from our effort. And that leads me to my next question. In what ways do you believe Black men can take ownership of their narratives to reshape how society views them? How can we take ownership of our narrative to change how society view us?
Mm. Um, I believe, Dr. Cross, it is a responsibility of every black male to change the narrative and stereotype that society has branded us with. Some black men perpetuate this negative narrative to make money, not realizing the impact that it has on our community. I think if every black man would turn off everything and reflect on race, reflect on identity, reflect on social justice, like Kendrick Lamar did, as he laid it out before millions of people at a halftime show at the Super Bowl. Um, then one step at a time for a black man, one person at a time as a black man, would reshape the narrative of societal views. Turn it off and get to know yourself, get to know your race, and look at social justice.
We have a critical role to play in changing the narrative, as you stated. As you mentioned that we have to look at race, but I really like the identity piece, because what have happened, we have take on the identity that have been created for us.
Right.
And if that's all we believe we are, it's like we are seeing ourselves through the lens of those who have created an image for us. And we see these images every day in the music videos and TV shows, especially now on social media. And as you mentioned, if we're going to change the narrative or reshape the narrative or how we are viewed in society, they have to be willing to take one step at a time to do the work where we can, where we are. And even if it is only one person at a time, as you mentioned, we have to make that commitment, because I think if we don't, and no one is going to change the narrative for us, no one is going to create the positive reflection for us, and we shouldn't leave that to someone else. That is something that we should make the commitment to do. And as you mentioned, if it is only one step at a time, one person at a time, we have to make that commitment if things are going to change. And I like to tell young people, when I'm talking to them, that we're always representing ourselves, despite what society may say, despite what you see. If you believe that things can be different and better, don't wait for those who you think should be doing it. You start doing it. And once we do it, what we're going to see is that those around us will start doing some of the same things that we're doing. So it's always about not waiting, but to take the first step and be the example so other people can see what's possible through us, which I believe is really, really important, because that's how we change the identity. And we start with us, we start with
Hmm.
ourselves. If we're going to change the narrative, it's not what we're telling people to do, but what we're willing to do ourselves. Because I think if we are the example, it is even more powerful than being, just being more. It's more powerful than telling someone to do, the what we think will help them by being the example.
Yeah, one of the big takeaways that I have, and I reflect on it quite often, and I've shared this with the young men. When I was in the village of Damanasi in Ghana, I got a chance to sit with three or four kings of different villages. And they said, stand firm in your stance, stand proud in your stance. Every young person you see running around here playing is your son and your daughter. You protect them all. You live for all of them as well as yourself. And as you have that type of mindset, it makes you think that they're watching every move you make. So you have to walk in integrity and in character at all times, because every action, everything you say or do, they're looking at, because they know you're looking out for them. And that's why we have to reflect. We have to know our race. We have to know our identity. And we have to just turn some things off and look around our community. We keep asking for different people to come and help change the narrative. We have to change the narrative. We
Correct,
have to stand firm in our stance.
correct. And I really like that. Stand firm in our stance, and also walk in integrity and character, and walk with the mindset that they are watching, and they are watching, believe it or not,
Yeah.
because I have, when I was on campus, I have students stop by the office that I've never met, that tell me that, sir, I saw you here on campus or there on campus. So I'm always trying my best to represent myself in the best way, because I'm there to, especially for black male students, to see positive role models. But students do stop by sometimes that I've never met, but I've said to me, oh, I've seen you when you were in the cafeteria talking to. So if I was acting out of character, it's the same thing. They would see me acting out of character. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And it's really important that we remember, whilst we are on our journey, we never know who is watching, and someone is always watching. So, sorry. My next question to you is, how do you ensure that the knowledge, skills, and experiences we gain are passed down effectively to the next generation?
Um, I encourage everyone to take part in ensuring knowledge, skills, and experiences are passed down. Everybody. It's
Okay.
easy at times, and sometimes it may be challenging, but I will say the reward is priceless, especially if you we're seeking to build a community of legacy builders. Mentor a child, mentor a student, mentor a young adult. It's an investment to them, and it's an investment for you. As you mentor them, trust and believe that if you're consistent with your mentoring, you're consistent in being there for them, they will do the same when their time is called. That's how we build legacies.
You know, and as I'm listening to you, and I know you were part of the Voices of Impact. That book that we have, uh, you know, worked on together.
Yeah,
That is a great way of passing down the knowledge, the experience, the skills. Because what we have learned, because we're not going to be able to talk to every young people,
hmm,
but sharing our knowledge, our experiences in books that can live forever. So it will not only impact this generation, it will impact generations to come. And just listening to you sharing, from what you just stated about the experience and how we need to get involved in playing that role in shaping the next generation, sharing our knowledge in books, in writing, that lives forever.
exactly.
And I just want to plug that in, being that, you have been a part of the Voices of Impact. And I've got several positive reviews, not just here in America. In England, man, the reviews are tremendous. They say, man, we need to see more positive black men, and the young people need it. Some of the people here do share the same sentiment, but when you hear it from a different country, it's
Yes.
different. It's like, not to say we don't see the value here, but some people will see more value in some of the things that we sometimes take for granted because we may have seen it so many times or so many people doing it. We may think or take it for granted, where
Hmm.
other people see it and really cherish and value the experiences, because some of the black men in the Voices of Impact had to overcome their own challenges to be where they are, to achieve their success, to be the example in their community. So I wanted to share that because it ties in exactly with what you share about, passing down the knowledge, or effectively passing down the knowledge to the next generation, because we can tell them every day, but when it's in a book, man, we can share that with millions of young people, to for them to learn from our experience and our success. Which leads me to my next question. What role does financial literacy play in legacy building, and how can we improve access to this knowledge in our community?
We kind of alluded to this earlier in our conversation, but I'm going to take a deeper dive in it. Um, you know, Financial literacy is critical.
Yeah,
It builds understanding and it helps us close the wealth gap. A wealth gap can be caused by many factors, including gender bias, racial discrimination, and inequitable education policies, just to name a few. But in order for legacy building, financial literacy will aid and assist a legacy builder and empower them to take control. That's the key, to take control of their financial situations in their lives. Having that economic knowledge and confidence will create a focus to take action, even when you have financial mishaps or
correct.
hardships. Having that literacy understanding helps you get back on track towards your goals, because we're all going to have some mishaps here and there. But if you don't have the financial literacy to understand how these instruments work, you can fall and crash real easy.
So the foundation is important. So once you establish the foundation, it will make it a bit easier to crawl back out of whatever
Hmm.
you fall into. Because as you mentioned, life happens and there will be situations that we have no control over. But once we have the foundation, and I think that's what our community, which we are seeing it now more than ever, the financial literacy classes, the financial literacy courses, the financial literacy seminars, conferences. And because I think that is really important for us, because a lot of us didn't start with that type of foundation. It's like we start with zero, we start with a blank page, especially when it comes to creating wealth. So, most of us, all we know, and nothing is wrong with working 9 to 5, the regular job. But even in the 9 to 5, because I was listening to, he's an entrepreneur, but he was saying, even when you're working for an organization, you need to have the same characteristics of an entrepreneur. That makes
Hmm.
you more valuable to the organization because there are organizations or there are work out there that we all are passionate about that we don't have to do on our own. We can do that work through an organization because we find fulfillment in it. But we need to think like the entrepreneur in the sense that we are more self driven and want to learn more about that industry that we're in. So if we can add value, which will in turn help us, because I was listening to a course yesterday and the young lady started and maybe this person have that financial literacy foundation. She saw where they have a gap within and she volunteered to do what she realized they need. So she was thinking more so of an entrepreneur, although she was working for an organization. What she mentioned to them, because she saw the need, right? And after her time run out, because she was just there working for a few months, when the time ran out and she was about to leave, they offer her a position that paid her 6 figures
Hmm.
that they didn't have before she started. She saw the gap and shared. But that goes to, as you were talking about, just having that knowledge. Because if we're not thinking about or developing those characteristics, we may be in organization that will have a need, but we're not thinking how we can add value. We're just there working just to do our own job that we are paid for, but yet there are opportunities, for us to. I think having that mindset. But go back to what the guy was saying. He was saying that we have to, wherever we are, to think like entrepreneurs so we can be as effective and maybe add value because we never know what opportunities are that will open because of the way we think and the way we add value within the organization. I know that may be a little bit different from the question, but I think it's important, that we kind of develop that mindset, because being an entrepreneur is not always, you just working for yourself. Having the characteristics within an organization, I think, can be very beneficial.
And I want to add to that comment that you had from that individual. When you have that mindset, even if you have a 9 to 5, you get to a place and you have the understanding of financial literate. You get to a place where your money will always be working even when you're asleep. And
Correct.
that's and so you want to have that financial independence where your currency is working for you when you're even resting.
Oh yeah, man. It's so important, man. I have a mentor. I will not say his name. He's been a millionaire, maybe maybe more than 15 years now, and he's still teaching. He's
Hmm.
still going to his teaching, you know. So he have the characteristics. He know what it takes to achieve success. He know how to manage the money, because again, it's not just to get the money. It's how you make it work for you and how to build on it. But he's still a professor at a university, and and sometimes when you look and say, you know what, man, if I was in that position, maybe I wouldn't be doing that. But not everybody think like that. Some people are in careers that they love and they find fulfillment in, because for him is to empower the young people, especially to teach them about wealth and creating wealth, because he
Hmm.
studied the successful people, especially black people, and how they create and generate their wealth. So being that he's in that space, I think it's important. If you're doing something that you love, man, it don't make sense you walk away from it. So I want to ask this question, and we're getting close to the end of our conversation today. But my next question to you is, how can black men leverage collaboration and networking to build stronger, more impactful legacy?
The leverage collaboration and networking today provide is crucial to creating impactful legacies because that intentional cohort of support creates a wider range of opportunities. It creates a community of resilience in the face of systemic challenges. Legacy builders working together as black men can leverage these collective resources, build strong social networks, and advocate for meaningful change, ultimately leading to a greater individual and community success.
Man, I think it is so important, and it seems to be a bit a challenge for
Hmm.
us as black men to work together. But I do see, black men working together. But we can do much better,
Yeah,
and that is a conversation that we see and hear a lot. But what I think may be causing us not to work together as we should, or we could, is the lack of trust that we have for each other. Maybe it is conditioning. Maybe it is because of past experiences, and maybe because of what we have seen in our community, where we grew up not seeing black men working together,
hmm,
or not seeing the positive results of black men working together. As you mentioned earlier, it's like we work in silos. We have a lot of us doing similar work, and the impact is happening, but we could have greater impact. I know, it will help us to be more resilient. It help us to make, greater impact. But I think that's where we need to, break the cycle, and that, I believe, comes through trusting each other.
exactly.
I think the distrust that we have amongst each other. I think that's one of the factors, and we have to also realize that as black men, we have to hold ourselves accountable to make things work and stuff like that. I think that's what we have to do. It's not going to be easy, and sometimes the results too. Because sometimes we're in a situation where we don't have the resources to get the results, and sometimes not seeing the results as fast as possible. Some people can get discouraged. It's not that they wouldn't, from what I've understanding, not that they wouldn't want to work together, but not seeing the results fast enough can make some people get discouraged from continuing the journey. Because again, people have things that they want to accomplish, and but it can take time to see change and growth and success. And I believe that can be a factor in causing lack of collaboration, because everyone wants to see success, everyone wants to see growth, but it's a process, and we just have to continue working on it. I believe, if we're going to see change. But I think the more success we see, the more we'll see black men working together, because success can really help to make uh organization or a group kind of gel more, because lack of success can maybe stem frustration, and not everybody know how to deal with that. But I think collaboration itself is important if we're going to achieve at a high
Mhm.
level. So my next question to you is, what one lesson you have learned too late that you wish younger black men could learn early?
I would say this lesson is not something that I realized too late, but I would like to say it's one that I see far too often. I see it daily with our young black men, especially being a former banker and business owner. And we kind of alluded to this earlier. Our young men need to respect our elders first, and listen to the wisdom that they give, because they are a treasure of nuggets that you will never find on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, or with your friends. These men, these women, these elders, that you're not going to find some of these key pieces you need to be successful. You're not going to find them in a book either. A lot of the individuals who are very successful get it by verbal communication by somebody older than them. And then also, time is not your friend if you're living a fast paced lifestyle, free and clear, with no focus on the next generation.
As you mentioned, we mentioned it earlier, and to learn from the older generation, or the gap today,
Yeah.
where young people are not having conversation with the older people within the community, which, as you mentioned, you may not find the knowledge that they can share with you on social media. But that's where a lot of the young people are, on social media. But we may have to find a way, you know, to get the experience and knowledge from
Hmm.
the older generation. So get to put it online, so the young people can actually see and engage with them online. Because I think
Right.
if that's where they are, we may have to find a way to get the generations before us, to share their knowledge, because they do have a lot to share from their own experience. But before I ask my final question, where can the listeners find and support you and the work that you're doing?
They can find me on our MBK and MSK website. It's mbkmskdayton.org. And you can find and follow all the great things that we are doing in Montgomery County in the city of Dayton, Ohio.
Do you have any events coming up that you want to share?
Our my sister's keeper is getting ready for a AI social media AI event where they're learning how to use AI for positive things, as far as education, as far as work, and as far as social. And then the biggest thing we have coming up is July 11th, where all the MBK chapters will be here in the city of Dayton, Ohio, coming and learning how we together collectively can have deeper conversations like we're having right now with our young boys and our young ladies on building better communities.
And that is important. That's important work, preparing the next generation to be the best that they can be. I believe that will definitely help to position them to help
Mhm.
the generations that follow them to be in better positions. So I really appreciate that. But my final question before we end the conversation today: what would you like your legacy to be, and what step are you currently taking to make it a reality?
I've had this question quite often, and it's always going to be the same answer, Dr. Cross. I want to live a life that honors God in everything I do. For the Bible says, only what you do for Christ will last. 2 Corinthians 4:18. So as long as I press towards the mark of the high calling, I believe my steps will surely leave a legacy that God will be pleased with first and foremost. My family, my inner circle, and my community will be blessed by it.
And that is important. It goes back to, not living for ourselves. And I appreciate you being here, and the knowledge that you have shared with us. I know those who are here benefit greatly, because you have shared great insights and perspectives that we all can apply as we move forward on our journey. And for the listeners who are here with us, thank you again for being here. And as always, our goal is to bring guests that we believe will share knowledge that we all can benefit from as we press forward on the journey. The Black Male Impact is where positive changes are inspired. Thanks again. We're looking forward to the next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cross.
A pleasure. Thank you.